Okay, are we all ready to dive in? Because today we're tackling something I'm sure we've all wondered about at some point. Is social media actually brainwashing us?
It's kind of freaky how often that comes up.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, are we all just trading away our privacy just to see how many people like our vacation pictures?
Yeah, and you send over a bunch of stuff for this deep dive, like research articles and even some Spark notes on 1984,
Yeah.
which is always relevant, it seems.
Seriously, though, right? It seems like that whole Big Brother thing and, the whole idea of being watched and manipulated really gets a nerve with people these days. It makes you think.
Right.
Like, are we all just letting ourselves get freaked out by, dystopian fiction?
Mm.
Or is there something more to it? I mean, that Pew Research Center study you pointed out said that something like 84% of people believe that all this tech is making us easier to manipulate.
Yeah, 84% across 19 different countries. Wow. So it's not just a small group of people who are worried about this. It's a pretty widespread concern. But here's the thing that I think is so interesting about that study. It also found that 73% of those same people said that technology makes them feel more informed about current events.
So wait, you're saying people are saying they feel both more informed and more vulnerable at the same time?
Exactly. It's like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
It seems like we're both empowered and kind of creeped out by all of this.
Oh, now my head is spinning. So how is that even possible? Like, how can we feel both ways?
Well, I think it shows just how complicated our relationship with social media really is. It's easy to think of it as this evil force that's controlling us, but it's not that simple. It's more like a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways. It all comes down to how we use it and how well we understand how it's being used on us.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Understanding how it's being used on us. Because let's be honest, it's not just about sharing funny cat videos anymore. I mean, did you see that report from Rand about the Chinese researcher who's working on AI-powered fake personas?
Oh, yeah. That one was pretty wild.
I mean, that is some seriously scary stuff.
Yeah, think about it. You've got these networks of fake people online. They're sharing memes and getting into arguments, just like real people. But it's all run by AI. And the whole point is to try and shape public opinion.
Hold on. So you're saying that it's not just about our data being collected, but they're using that data to create these fake profiles that then interact with us.
Yeah.
And maybe even try to change our minds about things.
Exactly. It's like a digital Trojan horse sneaking into our lives, disguised as our friends or, people we follow online.
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
And the technology to do this is only getting better, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, think about ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can already write some pretty convincing stuff. Now, imagine someone using that to spread fake news and propaganda. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right. But it's happening right now. It's not science fiction anymore.
It makes you wonder, like, how much of what we see online is even real anymore? Are we all just puppets being controlled by these algorithms?
Well, I don't think it's quite that bad yet. You know? There are still plenty of genuine connections and real conversations happening online, but I think it would be naive to ignore the risks here.
True. So it's about finding that balance, right? Between being aware of the potential for manipulation, but not turning into some conspiracy theorist who sees a hidden agenda behind every post.
Right. We need to be skeptical, but not paranoid.
So what can we do about it? Like, how can we protect ourselves without completely disconnecting from the online world?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we're going to keep exploring as we go deeper into this. But I think the first step is awareness. We need to understand the tactics that are being used and the potential biases that are out there.
You're right. Awareness is key.
Yeah.
But let's talk about something else that's been on my mind, and I'm sure it's on a lot of other people's minds too. What about privacy?
Right.
It feels like our privacy is just disappearing. I mean, everywhere you look, someone is tracking what we're doing online, what we're buying, what we're reading, you name it. It's all being collected and analyzed, and I don't know, it's just creepy.
It's a valid concern, and I think you're right that it often gets overlooked. We tend to focus on the more sensational stuff like fake news and all that, but the erosion of privacy is a much bigger problem, and it's happening right under our noses.
It really does feel like we're living in that panopticon from 1984, always being watched.
Yeah.
Like Big Brother is always looking over our shoulder.
Yeah, and I think it's a question we all need to be asking ourselves. Do we have any privacy left in the digital age?
That's a big one.
And it's something we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to go back to that whole mind control thing for a minute. I mean, we've talked about how social media isn't like some evil mastermind directly controlling our thoughts, but it's pretty clear that there are forces out there that are trying to influence us in some pretty sneaky ways.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's not so much mind control as it is manipulation. trying to subtly shape our opinions and behaviors.
And the techniques they use are getting more sophisticated all the time.
Exactly.
So it's more important than ever to stay vigilant and be critical of the information we're being fed. But how do you do that when you're constantly being bombarded with so much information? It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, that's for sure. But don't worry. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some strategies for navigating this crazy digital world. And we'll talk about how to reclaim our digital autonomy.
Okay, so stay tuned because we're just getting started.
So let's pick up where we left off and really dig into this whole privacy thing. It's like we're practically handing over all our personal information in exchange for, the convenience of social media and all that.
It's true. I mean, I hardly even think twice about clicking accept all on those cookie pop-ups anymore. But what really freaks me out is how all that data is being used to create these super detailed profiles of us. It's like they know more about us than we do.
Yeah, it can be kind of unsettling, right? They take all that data and use it to create these profiles, and then those profiles are used for things like targeted advertising.
Right.
Which on the surface might not seem so bad. But it's not just about showing you ads for things you might be interested in. This information can be used to predict our behavior, influence our decisions, even manipulate our emotions.
So is that what people mean when they talk about surveillance capitalism? That term always sounded a little creepy to me.
Yeah, it's a pretty fitting description. It's the idea that our personal data has become a commodity, something to be bought and sold and used to make money. And the scariest part is that it's often happening without us even realizing it, It's become so normal in our digital lives that we just kind of accept it.
That's what's so messed up about it. It's like this slow drip, drip, drip of our privacy just fading away. And it's not just corporations that are doing this, right? Governments are getting in on it too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get even more complicated. We've seen examples of governments using social media for surveillance and censorship, and even propaganda, like that RAND report we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The one about China using AI to create fake profiles.
Yeah.
That shows just how sophisticated this stuff is getting.
It's like a digital arms race,
Yeah.
with governments and corporations all fighting for control of our data and our minds. Honestly, it makes you want to chuck your phone in the ocean and just disappear.
I get it. But let's be real, disconnecting completely isn't really an option for most of us.
True.
So the question becomes, how do we navigate this digital world in a way that protects our privacy and our freedom to think for ourselves?
Okay, so let's talk about solutions. What are some practical things we can do to take back control of our privacy? Is it even possible at this point?
It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. The first step is awareness, Understanding how our data is collected, who's collecting it, and what they're doing with it. Once we understand that, we can start making more informed choices about the platforms we use, the information we share, and the privacy settings we enable.
So it's about being more deliberate with our digital footprint, not just clicking agree on everything without thinking.
Exactly. It's about taking back control. Using privacy-focused browsers and search engines, being careful about the apps we download, and regularly reviewing our privacy settings on social media.
Okay, so we need to become like digital detectives, carefully
Yes.
examining everything we do online.
Yeah.
But what about all those quizzes and personality tests that are all over social media? Are those just sneaky ways to collect even more data on us?
A lot of times, yeah. Those quizzes can be really good at getting people to reveal personal information. And then that information can be used to build even more detailed profiles, which can then be used for all sorts of purposes, some of which we may not be too happy about.
It's like we're making a deal with the devil. We trade our privacy for a few minutes of entertainment or, personalized news feed. But what's the real cost of that deal in the long run?
That's a question we all have to answer for ourselves. But I think it's important to remember that our data is valuable and we shouldn't just give it away without thinking. Every click, every share, every piece of information we put out there adds to these massive databases that are being used to shape the world around us in ways we might not even realize.
You've given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It's a bit depressing, to be honest. But before we all spiral into a pit of despair, let's try to focus on the positive side of things. Because social media isn't all bad, right?
No, of course not. Despite all the risks and challenges we've been talking about, social media has also been a force for good. It's connected people across the globe, facilitated social movements, and given a voice to people who might not have had one otherwise.
You're right. Think about the Arab Spring, or the #MeToo movement, or Black Lives Matter. Social media was crucial in getting those messages out there and mobilizing people to take action.
Exactly. It's given rise to citizen journalism, online activism, and a sense of global community that would have been unimaginable just a few decades ago.
It's a good reminder that social media is ultimately a tool, And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. The important thing is to be aware of the potential pitfalls while also using it to make a positive difference.
And that brings us back to digital literacy. We need to equip ourselves and future generations with the skills to navigate this complex digital world, to critically evaluate information, and to use social media in a way that empowers rather than enslaves.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Where we can enjoy the benefits of social media without sacrificing our privacy or our freedom to think for ourselves. But how do we actually do that? What are some concrete steps we can take to become more digitally literate?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll talk about some specific strategies for developing our digital discernment, becoming more aware of our online habits, and reclaiming our digital sovereignty.
Okay, so we've talked about the dark side of social media, like
Yeah.
the manipulation and the privacy issues and all that. It's a lot to take in. But before we all just throw our phones away and go live in a cave, I'm really interested to hear more about those strategies you mentioned. Like, how do we actually become more digitally literate? Where do we even start?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that digital literacy is not just a one-time thing. It's not like you learn it once and you're good to go. It's an ongoing process. It's about developing a critical mindset and learning how to evaluate information and being aware of our own biases, all that
Right,
stuff.
so it's like working out your brain muscles to get better at navigating the online world.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
One really important skill is source evaluation. We're constantly being bombarded with information from all directions, so it's crucial to be able to sort through it all and figure out what's trustworthy and what's not. So when you see something online, ask yourself some questions. Like, who's behind this information? What's their agenda? Are there any red flags? Like, are they using really emotional language or making logical leaps, or are they just not providing any evidence to back up what they're saying?
So it's not just about reading the headlines, but actually doing some digging, checking sources, considering different perspectives, basically becoming a digital detective.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to question everything. Just because something is trending on Twitter or whatever doesn't mean it's true. And just because someone, shared it doesn't mean it's accurate. Healthy skepticism is super important these days.
That makes sense. But honestly, it can feel totally overwhelming to try and fact check everything. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just so much information out there. Any advice on how to make that more manageable?
One thing that can help is to be more intentional about the information you consume. Like create an information diet for yourself. Be picky about who you follow. Prioritize quality over quantity. And don't be afraid to unfollow or mute accounts that are constantly sharing misinformation or just negativity.
Ooh, I like that. An information diet.
Yeah.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like being mindful of what we're feeding our minds, just like we're mindful of what we eat.
Yeah.
But what about the platforms themselves? What role should they be playing in all of this? Like, how can they help people become more digitally literate?
Honestly, they have a huge responsibility here, and I think they need to step up their game. It's not enough to just react to problems after they've already happened. They need to be more proactive about educating users, providing clearer guidelines for identifying misinformation, and creating tools that give users more control over their data and their online experience.
So more transparency, better educational resources, more user-friendly privacy controls.
Exactly, and they need to be held accountable. We need to hold them responsible for the spread of harmful content and make sure they're using algorithms in an ethical way, and of course that they're actually respecting user privacy.
It sounds like we need a total shift in the way we think about social media.
Yeah.
Not just as a place to kill time or promote our businesses, but as a powerful force that's shaping our society and our minds.
Absolutely. It's time to move beyond the passive scrolling and start being more intentional about how we use these platforms. We need to be active participants shaping the online world instead of letting it shape us.
So going back to the question we started with, is social media mind control? I think it's safe to say that it's not a simple yes or no answer. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It can connect us and inform us and empower us, but it can also be used to manipulate us and exploit us and take away our privacy.
And the key to navigating all of this is digital literacy. It's about developing the critical thinking skills and the awareness and the agency to use social media in a way that aligns with our values and serves our best interests.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. What if we all made a conscious effort to become more digitally literate? To question the information we see, to seek out different perspectives, and to use these platforms to make a positive difference in the world. Imagine the impact that could have.
It's an inspiring thought.
Yeah.
And it's something that's within our reach. The future of social media is not set in stone. It's being shaped by the choices we make every day. So let's choose wisely, let's be mindful, and let's use this technology to build more informed, more connected, and more compassionate world.